Hi, welcome to Awakenings Within.
Are you awake?
We're awake. Are you awake?
Yes, I'm awake.
Yay. So I noticed before we came on that you and Donna were matching colors and you didn't give me the brown memo, and I'm really offended.
Well, technically this is burnt orange, but it's showing up on the screen as brownish.
Well,
but
I
it's
would like
technically kind of, it matches
Oh.
it matches the colors in your in the background, the rocky Colorado. So where are you guys? It's like you've got this flag behind you or something, and I'm like, you look like two terrorists getting ready to broadcast some.
That's my
like
ocean
political
scene.
memo.
That is my beautiful ocean scene. What are you talking about? Oh my!
I was wondering what that was.
There's not going to be anybody rush up behind us right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was wondering if you guys had turned radical on me and were like getting ready to, start a new protest group or something, and we were broadcasting live from your new headquarters.
We are in an undisclosed location.
Ooh.
We're in an undisclosed location. It's very mysterious. Yes. Hey, Heather. Nice to see ya.
So Heather, hey y'all.
Hey y'all.
So you gotta go y'all.
Yeah, you can tell she's from a more southern state because she says y'all.
I would think so. Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to introduce this person that's in the frame here.
Okay.
This is Donna Ingram, and she is of a relation to me. I don't know if you can tell. People don't think so until they see us side by side.
And then it all starts coming together.
Right.
Salt and pepper here.
I'm the older sister.
Of course. The logical, organized, well together older sister.
Wow, that's what are you saying about me?
No, we older ones, we have a thing, we kind of know what our role is in the scheme of things.
So Heather saying hi, Donna.
Hey Heather, how are you?
Hey Tom, thanks for joining. So yes,
he's got a y'all too.
Y'all, yeah. What's up with the y'alls all of a sudden?
We're y'alling tonight.
Y'all. That's because we're near the beach.
I thought y'alled when you were like at a rodeo or like we were, the y'all people are all freezing right now. Like the y'all people, I have a cousin down in Austin, and they're cooking on their gas grill inside the house.
Yeah,
that's happening.
It's actually really sad. There's been quite a few deaths.
Yeah, it's very sad.
Texas is not used to it at all.
So there y'all. And
so sad is it's from carbon monoxide. So
yeah.
So what's Heather saying? There is no beach by my y'all.
Touche. Good one, Heather.
No, I have accidentally said that y'all all thing before. That when somebody says, "Hey, y'all all,"
you're a snowbird.
Who, me?
Yeah, you're like all the northern people go south to Florida. You're a snowbird,
I'm going.
The only thing you're not is Jewish.
No, not that I know of.
No, all the Jewish folks from New York, they have places in New York and in Florida,
In Florida. Yeah, Florida.
And they don't y'all.
They call it Florida. They say Florida.
Y'all.
They say Florida.
Florida.
They do. So
tell us about older sister.
So Donna, yes, please introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit about
I wanted you to introduce her because I know, it's like, what's your perspective on your older sister?
There you go.
Oh, Now wait a minute.
That's
My perspective. Well, we have an awesome bond. She's my older sister, but like she's the type of sister that she'll be my best friend forever. So we have that kind of bond because we're really close in age, 2 years apart. When we were growing up, we didn't live together. Mm-hmm. So my dad took her and my mom took me and we were split. So we were only children that were sisters, which is really, and we have a third sister too.
Wasn't there a movie like Separated at Birth or something like that?
Right.
Well, and then we have a third sister as well, a younger sister. Okay. And she also was an only child. So figure that one out.
So you kind of got 3 firstborns, but not really.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And it's interesting. Like, so I lived in the city-ish, kind of like the city. And then she lived out in the suburbs always. And so, and then when we got older, what was cool is then we only lived like a mile apart and we could visit each other.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of neat when we were teenagers. Cool. Yeah. So my perspective on her is that we're definitely different. She's definitely, like you said, the more organized, a
linear thinker.
Yes. Introverted more than me. She's not introverted though. You're not introverted, but more introverted than me. Okay. And we have just different perspectives. And what's interesting is she grew up with my dad, who I'm like, and then I grew up with my mom, who she's like.
Wow, this is intriguing. There's a book in here somewhere.
There is an Oprah show.
Yeah, show.
Definitely an Oprah show.
Yeah, because our younger sister was adopted out,
and she looks exactly like our mother, and even laughs and smacks her leg when she laughs, just like our mom, and that's genetics because she had never met her.
So, well, I come from an adopted situation, so I have no idea about my siblings. But having been in that community and had people get reconnected with their families, it's mind-boggling how you're sitting there across from each other for the first time, having all these similar traits, and you're like, wow, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, and the neat thing about our youngest sister, when we met her, she was 28 before we ever.
Yeah, we never met her till
instantly. Then. I mean, like she and I shared a bond all those years, and Juliet was instant.
Yeah,
there was no working up to it.
Yeah,
there was no, hey, I need to get to know you. It was an instant thing for all 3 of us.
Don't you find that rather amazing when you think about it? It's like, it's kind of cool. It's like, wow.
It's very cool.
Yeah,
but then it also explains why there's such deep bondedness.
Mm-hmm.
Families, even when they're dysfunctional sometimes, you know what I mean? There's like this connection, and it's like, what do you call it? It's metaphysical. It's, it's in this sort of realm of the unseen, but when you're there, it's like you see it. It's like, oh my God, there it is.
Well, if there was any case of genetic versus environment, is the first time I went in my sister's cupboard, the one that was adopted, and I opened up her cupboard and she had all of these plastic cups exactly like my mother.
Oh, wow.
Because she only liked that kind. And then we found out brand wise, like things she bought at the store, everything was exactly like what our mom would buy because that's what she liked. And it was like, how is that genetic? Wow. That's amazing.
Well, I have a very dear friend from Kansas City who's an artist, a musician, very talented musician, who was adopted. And through that genetic website, 23andMe or something? Yeah. She ended up being very, very disappointed because there was only one person on there that she had an 11% connectedness with. And so she sort of gave it up as, a lost leader. It's like, this is disappointing. Well, a few months later, this particular woman contacted her and said, hey, I know we only have 11% connection, but for step sisters or something or cousins, no, that's what it was. For cousins, that's actually the norm. And here's my story. Well, as the two of them started talking, they discovered that they were actually cousins. And anyways, my friend ends up finding her family. Sadly, her mother was already deceased, but her mother was a musician, just like she was.
Yeah.
And it was like this powerful, deeply emotive experience of getting reconnected. And it was like, oh my God, there I am. Right.
Yeah.
What was even cooler was that her grandfather still had her mother's guitar and gave it to her. And so she just came out with an album a few months back where she played her mother's guitar on her album, you know.
Oh, that's neat.
But she's got sisters and cousins and all these things. And she just said it was just surrealistic. It was like suddenly I was with a whole bunch of people that I instantly understood. There was like no manual. It was just there it was.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. Amazing.
And that's what we experienced and our youngest sister experienced. She had not been around anyone that was genetically tied, I mean, true, and she felt it immediately.
Yeah.
It was I wouldn't say like a missing piece because we didn't walk into it like that. We deliberately and consciously discussed that we weren't going to lament over the loss that we were feeling, that we were going to just go ahead and go forward and not be upset about.
Well, you can't undo it. You know what I mean? It's like you can't go back and recapture it. So it's like we can have our emotional moments about it, but there's nothing we can really do about it. So it's sort of a waste of time and energy.
Yeah,
I'm the same way about my situation. It's like there's a lot of I could go down a lot of roads, and I'm just like, no, it is what it is.
Right. She found her father a couple of years ago. Thank goodness.
Oh, wow.
He just passed away, but she found her father and another half sister. So
right.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's stories, you read stories of people, like twins or people that were disconnected from each other when they were children, right? Or babies. And then 60 years later or 50 years later, they reconnect. And it's like they can finish each other's sentences. It's like there's this just instant. And I just find that absolutely amazing. It's just like, wow, God, that is incredible the way you've created all this,
And they don't even need to be twins because we do that on a regular basis. And even the youngest sister, I mean, it's one of those things where we can be in a setting, and people watching or whatever, and somebody will do something and all three of us will have an identical reaction like, oh, and we don't even have to say anything.
Exactly.
It's just like, oh my God.
You gotta love it.
Yeah.
Precious moments, eh?
Yes.
Yeah, we're not really sure if we all grown up in the same house, all three of us, we might not be so close.
I'm the middle, so who knows?
Right.
I think I would have been the
peacemaker. The reality about perspective is really only gained in the rear view mirror. You know what I mean? So
yes, exactly.
Even in situations as children that were often strenuous, as you get older as adults, you sort of look back and go, oh, well, now I understand. Like I have context to why you were so mean to me.
Right. So I just want to say, Tom, thank you for sharing on our stream, and I will message you about that. And Michael, hello. Thanks for joining us. First time he's ever.
Okay.
Hi, Dominic. Nice to see you. So what is the top? Are we going to jump into our topic or?
Well, that's up to you, ladies. I was just kind of trying to get drilling down a little bit about the sisterhood of the traveling pants.
Well, she's the witty, smart, organized.
Well, I know I've never met Donna personally, but from some of the comments that she's made, she has a wicked sense of humor that is I find fascinating. So
I sit there and I go, huh.
Exactly. So,
and then I'm the peppy, goofy, free flow.
well, you're not in each other's space, that's for sure.
Peppy is definitely not my strong suit. However, I'm not a pessimist.
So every once in a while, Sandy has to back up and hook up to you and pull you out of the mud. Every once in a while, she has to, hook up to you and keep you from floating into the stratosphere.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Pop a couple bubbles here and there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We have we post every once in a while. We have sister chats. And our sister chats always are rather interestingly funny.
Or stupid. We don't know which. We don't really care.
Great. Thank you for sharing your story. I think it's great,
Yeah. Yeah. And then you add our little sister in the mix. Yeah. But we don't get to see her. She's in St. Louis.
And she's camera shy. She would never get on here and do that.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. She's getting more bold. We'll get her on one day.
Okay.
You don't want to see the three of us. Watch out.
We got trouble then. Trouble in River City.
Yeah, but it's nice. It's nice, having a sister this close. But yeah, what's interesting is we're different spiritually too, which is really neat. So she grew up with my dad in a different organized religion, and I grew up with my mom with no organized religion. So it's an interesting dynamic. How we both
you guys get together, you have the whole spectrum covered. So
yeah, she helped me to understand a perspective that I didn't understand, and then I think I've done the same, with her in my charismatic way.
Well, you told me you guys wanted to talk about God's will and free will, so this should be really interesting with the salt and pepper duo on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, we do look like salt and pepper, don't we?
You do. That's what I said. I feel like I'm talking to salt and pepper here.
Huh?
Which one are you?
Well, you're the salty one. Yeah, I'm more peppery and she's more salt. That doesn't make sense.
I have no hair. I'm sort of bland.
Doesn't go with the thing.
Yeah. I don't have any color hair. I guess I should have wore a red wig just so that we could have had some diversity, I could have been hot.
Oh, Desma. Yes, Desma has a adoption story, I think. Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Oh, that's awesome, Desma. Yes.
Well, it's neat that we can even talk about it. I mean, I grew up, I was born in 57 and adoption and those kind of things, you just didn't talk about it. There was such shame involved in the whole
thing. Well, we didn't know that we had a sister until we were 18.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We didn't even know she existed.
But I mean, it's neat in some ways, that we're able as adults to be able to have conversations about this stuff. I mean, you go back to when we were younger. I mean, all that's, those were like, it's like to kill the mockingbird.
I'm not understanding your story.
The guy that lived in the house and to kill the mockingbird is like the secret. You know what I mean?
So
we had all these secrets and nobody ever wanted to talk about it.
So are you the adopted one or the not?
No, I was adopted.
You were adopted. Yeah, I saw that light just go off, huh?
I know. I don't know if it's the bulb that went off or what that was. So that's weird. Oh, well. You can still see me, though. I'm not in the dark.
Yes, we can still see you. There's still a glare. Don't worry.
I know. I used to, like, if I was really a pro at this, I'd do like I did every time I did on TV interviews, most everybody sitting next to me is getting their face done. I'm getting the top of my head done. They're like, ladies are powdering me on the top of my head and they're laughing at it going, yeah, you're the worst because, because it's at the top of your head. The lights just glare. We don't want to blind anyone out there.
Well, I don't have glasses on.
Powder my head.
So yeah, we were going to talk about that perspective of God's will versus
free will.
And yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons in that, still learning lessons through that. I don't think we're ever done with learning those lessons, right? I mean,
well, a lot of people see the two as being in conflict, but they're not really. So I'm going to sit back here a little bit and let you guys sort of develop the subject, and then I'll jump in a little bit with my
it was our guest
it.
host's topic, so I'm gonna turn it to you first, just because
None of the theologian is going to expand.
Well, so I don't have a theological background or anything. I do have a self studied background. I grew up in a the largest, Catholic church. And when I turned 18 or so, I studied with the Jehovah Witnesses, the Muslims. I did a lot of self investigation, study, and so forth. And so I've kind of, over my years, I turned 55 on Sunday. And over the years, I have just studied this and that, been to different Christian churches. Non-denominational is one that I have never been involved with, so any vineyards or anything like that. But Christianity as a whole, and it's not something that has been this front and center in my life. Practicing religion, spirituality has been at a personal level that even, I don't even discuss it. No one around me. I have the outbranch of my children have their views from different, Mother Earth to atheism and to all of these different things. So there's just a wide spectrum here. Interestingly, the last few years, I've made a lot of choices in life that I thought were permanent choices, so to speak. I don't, marriage. I was married and, honest to gosh, thought it would be forever. I mean, I really was committed and so forth. And then life came along and he and I split, and it was devastating at the time. That's been many, many years ago. Put me in a tailspin, and took a lot of years for me to trust that situation again, and made another attempt. Didn't remarry, but thought I would be, and that didn't work out, and so forth. So the conversation, I had always planned to retire at the age of 55. So this last couple of weeks, I've been doing a little bit of reflection of that's not going to happen. Just like the different things that were good on the surface, or particularly when I, my marriage vows in front of God, and I thought that this was God's will. And I'm not saying that it wasn't. There was lessons in this and that. My will coming in and God's will. And what I've recognized is that they can be one and the same, but then they can also not be, or they appear to be one thing and not the other. So we were having a discussion this week about, God's will versus free will, when there appears to be a conflict with them. Of course, no one has a crystal ball, so you don't know the lesson until you know the lesson in it. And then we also were discussing, for years and years, and especially in the environment I grew up in, the organized religion, it's a reward system. And I no longer subscribe to the reward system. It didn't ever make any sense anyway, because if you're operating on a reward system from God, then the killing of innocent children and, all the, let's get real, the rapes and all that wouldn't fit into that, because nobody deserves that.
Right.
That's just right. That's just an exorcism of someone else's free will,
right,
against God's will. And so that was the discussion. And I said, well, why don't we just talk a little bit about that, especially with you, Bob, since you're a theologist. I really wanted to hear what you had to say.
One, no.
What?
I'm a dangerous one.
You're a dangerous one. No, I don't think so.
It's just, I'm despite my being a firstborn, I have a rebellious streak in me. And so I tend to ask why about everything. So there's a part of me that's a conformist, but then there's a whole side of me that's a non-conformist. And it's like, well, why? Why are we all
that about her? I think that's exactly, you just described her to a T.
Yeah. Well, it's, and so I think probably for me, the biggest surprise of life has been that I thought when I got to this age, I'd know more, and I actually know less.
Yes, that's a terrible thing to understand.
And the reason for that, of course, is that when you're younger, you think the span of life is this big, the understanding you need to navigate life is about this wide, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay, that's manageable. I can do that. I just need to apply myself, and we create all the rules, and our churches and our church leaders come along and they tell us all the rules, and they give us all the formulas, and we sell books about how if you do these things and 5 things and 10 things, you're going to get this from God, and right. And then as you get older, you start going, man, this is getting, that's my hands are going off the screen, because that's exactly what it feels like. Pretty soon you start realizing, wait, this is way more complicated than I ever really realized. And I really only know, I mean, I might know more than I did, but in the context, I feel like I know less. So I probably the biggest thing that's changed in my life is dogmaticness. I've gone from being, I know, and dogmatic to, I'm not really sure about that.
Know.
Let's look at that.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna. Years ago, I attended a thing called the Landmark Forum, and they essentially, I was down in Dallas. That's when I lived down in Dallas. They essentially lock you in a room for 3 days with 200 other people, and then tear you down into pieces. But one of the things that I picked up, and this was years ago, 10 years ago or so, was, and I love telling younger people that I'm teaching this. There's things that you know, there's things that you don't know, there's things that you don't know, and then there's a whole world of things you don't know. And that's where we're at.
I mean,
so you
Great way of putting it.
Livers, I know what a heart surgeon is, but I don't know this. But there's, and that opens, and I think that, we won't deviate too far, but that's where we have critical thinking skills are being diluted nowadays, in my personal opinion. So without those critical thinking skills, it goes into the conspiracy theories and all these, craziness, because it's into the things that we don't know.
Yeah.
So
you can get pulled into that.
Yeah.
I think that's true about God. Like, one of the things that's been disturbing to me of late is so many people telling everyone else what the will of God is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you know?
Right. Right.
It's like and they're so dogmatic, and it's like, well, and if you don't see what I see as being the will of God, then you're outside the will of God. And you're like, if I was 20, I'd probably be nervous. But at my age now, I'm like, oh Lord, here we go again.
Right. I'd like to highlight what Heather had to say, though. What she thought was God's will, she realized she never asked God about, and to bless something. So it was free will versus God's will. And I guess that's the rear view mirror, though. You don't know that.
Well, I have a little saying that I tease people about, when they talk about the will of God, and I go, it's really amazing to me how much the will of God looks just like what you want.
Right.
And the only reason I say that tongue in cheek is that I've been at this for a long time, and I can't believe how many people have come to my office disillusioned because the will of God didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to say about my marriage. That was a free will on my part, definitely not God's will. And hindsight's 2020.
That's
right.
I
mean, there's the suffering that comes after the fact, because you have this idea or in this set of ideals, and then they're shattered, or you perceive them as shattered. And that's what our conversation was about. Because and I'm just going to say it because, well, I don't have to host the show every week, so I can say it.
We love having guests. We'll clean up the mess later.
Me off.
Okay.
But here's what I have to say, and we talked about it earlier, is, if you truly, I'm at a point in life where no excuses. I'm not by any means excusing people's behavior, but if you truly, truly subscribe to Jesus washed away our sins, then Hitler and Jeffrey Dahmer are okay. They are. I mean, you can't have it just your will. There's your will versus God's will. If God's will is my son, this, I mean, it's simplistic, then that means every sin of any degree is forgiven.
Well, that's where we were talking about the shack again on Monday. Mm-hmm. That book, to me, that when they redid that and they made it into a movie, and that one scene where Wisdom's standing there going, okay, and saying, to the father, in the book, in the story, about God, who does he love more? What child does he love more? Right? He has to choose, right? Is that what we're saying?
Well, one of the things though that where it gets complicated and where religion has really played a terrible role in being oppressive in people's lives is that people have extrapolated out of the Bible, all these things that are the will of God.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And created a whole list. I mean, and we've even developed the word holiness around, well, if you do these things, then, you're holy, you're right. And if you do those things, well, you're a sinner. You know what I mean? And we've created all this, right?
Yeah.
Except for the amazing thing about the Bible is it doesn't address most things. You know what I mean? And that's where I don't want to like rain on everybody's parade and be shockingly whatever. But the truth of it is the Bible, bless its heart. I love the Bible dearly.
Yes, me too.
The people and the perspectives of the Bible are thousands of years old through the eyes of people who would have no idea even what to do with a cell phone, would have no concept of a lot of what's right. In other words, they didn't live in our world.
Right.
They wouldn't have understood. In fact, my third grade, grandson probably has more knowledge than most of, 90% of people in the ancient world couldn't even write. They couldn't read.
Well, and that's why it's called the Bible.
So where it really gets
written
documents. That's why I love always going back with Jesus and focusing on what Jesus taught, because what Jesus talked about was the heart and motive, right? It wasn't always about this activity and that activity and don't do this and he focused on motive, on the will of God being a heart that cared for other people's brokenness, cared for other people's weakness, loved other, it was that was the will of God, to love others, not to do this and don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, religion has taken it all and systematized it in a way and created all these boundaries. In fact, as I think I've used this analogy with you before, religion takes a ranch and turns it into a maze.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus put boundaries down and said, like you go outside of these boundaries, you're going to get in trouble. But inside of here, be free to, to run. Religion comes along, goes, you can't, there's very high walls and narrow corridors, and you have no leeway. You either go forward or backward. There's no sideways.
And when I used to talk about the Old Testament, because the Old Testament can be very challenging for anybody that's just starting out to read the Bible. And I would explain it so that these are stories about these people, but the main theme through it is always that God was always trying to get their attention into listening to him and to show his supernatural power through all of their situations. It didn't have anything to do with the specific them, because it's cyclical. It all happens again. And so the Old Testament is just really, constant with that theme. Like, yes, somebody was the underdog, somebody overcame, but why did they overcome? It's because they focused back on God and they did what he said. And then he showed his supernatural power through their situation. And it was never them. It was never them. It was never them personally. It was always him. And he's always trying to get our attention. So I think when we're stepping in God's will or we're not in God's will, he's trying to get our attention. He's like, hey, if you're not in my will and this, I'm with you. But
this whole story starts back in the garden. I mean, if when you get into the free will issue and God's will, or God's sovereignty, which is interesting. So much is predicated on the story in the Garden of Eden, right? And the tree of knowledge and good and evil.
Yeah.
Right. Because remember, there was this thing, there was an innocence about Adam and Eve. They didn't have to deal with the pressure of making choices based on the knowledge of good and evil, right? And then God said to them, well, if you eat from that tree, you're going to be like God. Right? Or the serpent said that, right? You'll be like God. In other words, you'll suddenly now have to make choices.
Yep.
But even before that, what's fascinating is God puts Adam and Eve in the garden, right? And he says, no, you manage it. In other words, he gave them responsibility for this world.
Yeah.
Right. And then he gave them the capacity to make a choice, whether they were going to stay faithful to him or want to be gods themselves. And so what ends up happening is once they gain the knowledge of good and evil, they become the gods of this world.
And that is exactly right. And that's
I know you and that's been the battle now for thousands of years, right?
And that's why
even Jesus, if you go back, it's a kind of a, what do you call it? An obscure verse. But if you go back to, I think, what is it? It's John. It's in John 10. I think it's around 30. It says, Jesus answered them, has it not been written in your law? I said, you are gods.
Right.
And a lot of people have been confused on that. But what it really he's talking about there is that, in this world, we are gods. In other words, we rule over nature. We rule over that. We rule, right?
Right. But we're not right. But if we're only,
that's where free will comes in.
Right.
We have the free will to make choices based on our knowledge of good and evil and the world we want. That's why I have a hard time with a lot of these prophetic people, you know what I mean? Telling everyone, what God wants, when in fact, a lot of it, God said, no, what do you want? It's your world. I put you in charge of it. So, I mean, and the reason I bring this up is because the truth of it is 99% of the time, God doesn't intervene.
Yeah.
He leaves us to our own choices, our own free will, and we have to deal with the consequences of those choices, as Donna was pointing out.
Unless we ask him into the situation, and I know that Jesus has always been called a gentleman. He's not going to come, he wants you to ask him into your heart, into your life. He's not forcing you. There's a reason for that. It's the free will. He gave us free will. He wants us to have fellowship with him, but we have to ask him to come in. It doesn't go the other way around.
Well, it's really the battle of kingdoms, if you think about it, right? So there's kingdoms of this world, you know what I mean? And now if you go back thousands of years ago, it looked a little different, but now we have these very defined national boundaries, and there's kingdoms. Even the devil himself comes to Jesus and offers him these kingdoms, right? These man-made kingdoms, right?
Right.
And he said, no. And the reason is he had his own kingdom.
Yeah.
Right. It was a kingdom that had a heavenly perspective. And so that's the choice right now. The free will choice that we're stuck between is being pulled towards the worldview based on the knowledge of good and evil of the kingdoms of this world, or are we going to adopt the perspective of the kingdom of God?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is a different perspective, right? And so that's the struggle. Is the free will is a it's a switch. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to pursue these kingdoms or that kingdom? And that was the whole battle all the way through the Gospels, was this collision of these two kingdoms, and they have very different value systems.
And it's from the very beginning.
So where it gets really complicated, right, is in the U.S., our religious world has become so entwined with our politics and our culture.
But that started in other kingdoms before it got here.
Right. But it's become so intertwined, and but I'm talking about Christianity in particular. It's become so intertwined that we've sort of lost touch with the kingdom of God. It's not distinct. Well, I mean, it is distinct, but we've lost touch with it, so we've lost its distinctiveness. And part of the problem is we don't like the kingdom of God really, because it doesn't really fit within our nice and needy sort of, or nice and tidy sort of American perspectives about prosperity and ego and, building our own I mean, we live in a country that lauds people for building their own kingdoms.
Right.
We all want to be king in our kingdoms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, or queens, or queen. Thank you.
And if you talk about ancient times, anyone back in those days, if they saw one single one of us, they would think that we're kings and queens. I mean, look at what we have. Look at the riches compared to,
well, that's a worldview that he talks about all the time.
Yeah.
That in other countries right now, that's the way it is. So I just want to say hi to some people joining us. I'm sorry. Hi, Lynn. Hi, Mark. Hi, Larry. There's Larry. He was
Social
happy.
Sister's doing her thing now.
Huh?
Social Sister, you're doing your thing.
Social Sister. Yeah. Sorry.
Scholar Sister and I are having a deep conversation on these theological issues.
Yes, thank you guys for sharing and everything. Sorry, there, got through my highs. Hello, okay, back to.
No, but this battle of free will and God's will is sort of interesting. You know what I mean? Because, what is God's will?
And I don't know that I've ever encountered a true battle so much as a bit of a conflict or a confusion. Maybe not put a negative word to it. Maybe. Even though I don't believe conflict is a negative, conflict being
opposing,
and
diametric power, good and evil. That's a conflict all the time. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we live in the middle of conflict, but you're right. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just descriptive.
No, but if you take should I be I want to be in a relationship with this person and commit to, for simplicity, or is this God's will? Is it free will? Well, a lot of relationships, and look at the divorce rates and all that, that's free will. Then you have relationships, and I'm not.
So do you think God has a choice for you and a partner?
That's a good question now, isn't it?
Well, the reason is because I was raised Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. Then I spent 7 years as an agnostic, and then came into the kingdom of God through the evangelical mindset. And back in the day, which was in the 70s, there was this whole thing about the perfect will of God. Mm-hmm. And I found myself enslaved and fearful every day because I didn't know what the will of God was. I mean, it was like, does God want me to wear a striped shirt or a solid shirt? Does God want, you know what I mean? Then it gets into relationships, and you spend so much of your time fearful, and then one day I started asking myself, well, wait a minute, I'm I've like made an assumption here that what they told me is true. What if God doesn't care what color shirt I wear?
Well, I don't think that God has a specific person, but I think that there is a set of values, a set of behaviors and things. So we all have different personalities. If I wanted to be a baker, and then I want someone to be around me that's going to support that. So do I think he has? Yes, in concept, in an ideal situation. What's the old thing? Opposites attract. The reason that we say that is because there's been so much conflict with people getting into relationships where it's not working out because their behaviors aren't matching. So I don't know that I would be so black and white to say that God has a specific partner for you, but I think that if you are in touch with yourself and you're in touch with your purpose and your meaning with God, then you're going to be drawn to and only tolerate and allow into your world people that fit into that ecosystem that you've created for yourself.
You're talking about being equally yoked. It would be the biblical phrase, and it's based on values, right? In other words, we share worldviews, we share values,
right?
So we're yoked based on those things. No, this is a really a big issue because it's kept a lot of people living in fear of not being
in the will of
knowing what the will of God
what
is,
it is,
being in the will of God. I mean, I would have to say, I mean, I don't want to over exaggerate here, but I mean, my office has been filled with lots of Christian couples that knew it was the will of God they got married as they were getting divorced.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, this is interesting, and rethinking a lot of things and going, you know what I mean? And so that's what I was saying earlier. The will of God often looks just like what we want. It's amazing what a coincidence that is, And so we have this way of sort of whatever. But I'm just wondering, the reason I'm asking is this based on this free will concept, how much of life is really our choice? And this where this really gets interesting is this has been my issue with a lot of the prophetic people and the political situation that's gone on. All these, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, we're a democracy. 270 years ago, we made a choice that the people would decide who was going to lead the country. So we make a choice. We have a free will, and we go and we make a choice. God doesn't make a choice.
Right.
We make the choice. And we have to live with the consequences, whatever those things are.
So you don't believe that God put people on a throne, so to speak?
Well, that's a little different situation.
Right. Okay.
You're talking apples and oranges. When you're talking about the ancient world, you're dealing with families, bloodline.
They were genetically put into those places.
And they all believed, right, that they call it the divine right of kings, that I was born into this, I had a right, God doesn't want me here, he'll take me out. Well, it's a very different situation. We have 150 million people that are making a choice.
Right.
So what if God
maybe.
Well, no, I'm just saying that we made a decision 270 years ago that we were going to adopt this form of government where we all had a choice.
Right.
And whoever chose most one way, that's where it went. We chose free will, right?
But that is where we're in conflict right now in our politics. That's where we're in conflict right now in our politics, because half of us believe
battling each other.
Right. Half of us don't believe that we made the choice at this point. And that's where that's why we're sliding, down this slippery slope.
So this is, there's this even gets into the whole issue of judgment. A lot of people, they see God as being proactively judging. And I went, no, actually, most of the time, God's judgment is he does nothing. He actually lets the people live with the consequences of their choices,
of their free will choices.
So, you know, where this gets interesting is that, you know, even in the founding fathers, you had guys like Jefferson who became deists. And the reason was because they stepped back and went, wait a minute. You look back over history, most of the time God didn't do anything, you know? And so this really is, I mean, I know we're getting into some philosophical stuff, but most of the time God doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
It's all we do. We make the choices.
Well, right. And even in a situation where you think God was in the midst of, say, putting some people into a relationship together, because of free will choices, that relationship can go down a different path because of free will, because of choices that person made. And God does take his hand off of that and says, okay, if you're not going to look to me as a couple and as one, then I'm taking my hand off of this. Right. So because we're both not looking.
Look like, I know I lived this up close and personal. My first marriage was a church marriage, all based on the fact it was so right. It was so spiritual. You know, we were this group, you know what I mean? I mean, you couldn't have had a more perfect situation in the sense of the church world. You know what I mean? It was my best friend's sister. We were all in this thing together. It was just, everything was perfect. It was so God. Everybody said it was God.
Right.
And here's the irony. You know who the one person who said it wasn't God? It was her mother, who was an alcoholic, who prophesied to me exactly where the marriage would go.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So go figure that one out. What's that?
That doesn't surprise me a bit. Personal view, addicts and people that are that empathetic and become addicts have great insight into human behavior and all of that, and hence the suffering and the addictions.
Me not to marry her daughter.
Yeah.
Wow.
After a 6-pack of beer, and she laid it all out. Why? And it gets back to what, you know, she just said, you're mismatched. Like your personalities are, you know what I mean? And you're whitewashing this with religion. Like it all, you're all so scared. And we were what, 18 and 20, you know what I mean?
Oh my goodness.
Fire, and you know what I mean? So, you know,
we're going to do a lot of things.
My cards out on the table here, but I mean, she was absolutely right.
Right.
I was kind of a shock. I'm like, oh my God, my alcoholic mother-in-law was right. And all my religious church friends were wrong.
See, I understand what she was just saying. I mean, that's true. They're trying to anesthetize some of their giftings of feeling other people's stuff and all the emotions swirling around them sometimes. I mean, that is the truth about empaths and intuitives, I guess, you know.
Right.
I don't know how much time we have left.
It's just, you can get so caught up in things. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, especially, you know, subculture narratives. I mean, that's what's going on right now in our country. We have people of they're down in their subcultures, you know what I mean? And so the will of God looks exactly like their subculture narratives. And so that's why, you know, for me, what I'm always looking for, which is those interesting little prophetic people that you find in the Bible that are the one-offs.
Yeah.
They're saying what nobody's saying.
Right. They're not even talking about what's at hand.
There's a lot
they're talking about things in the future.
Broadcast as prophetic on both sides of the equation, which in my view are echoes.
Yeah.
They're echoing subculture narratives, subculture worldviews. It looks exactly like how they think.
Right.
And so every once in a while, you get this person out in left field who's not in these subcultures, who comes up with a perspective that's just different. And so that's what I look for, because usually that's the will of God. It's that one, you know, voice. You know what I mean? You see this. In fact, there's that one story of the one prophetic guy where the two kings, king from Judah and the king from Israel sitting there like, smoking a cigar together. And they're like, well, we need some advice. Let's bring in this prophet. I don't know. I think it was Micah or whoever it was. And he goes, oh, no. Don't bring him in here. He never says anything nice about me. So, and the reason is most of the prophets of old were flatterers. They were sycophants. Yep. You know what I mean? They made their money based on telling stroking the king's egos.
Right.
And that's nothing new. And it's not changed today. So this is where we got to be really careful when we're talking about the will of God.
Well, not just we used a very simple, easy to understand example of a relationship, but it also goes into the activities we enjoy, our hobbies, and our career choices. And I remember once my mother telling me, and I initially took offense to what she said. I was just pulling my hair out, this and this and this, and about work and that. And she said, would you just get down out of the clouds and bring it down a level? And I thought, oh my God, she's trying to crush my dreams. How dare her tell me to not shoot for the stars? And it wasn't, unfortunately, until after she died that it hit me. That is not what she was saying at all. Mm-hmm. She was trying to pull me back in and get me fast-tracked and to think about one thing and not try to, like they say in sales, there's 12 steps to the sale. If you miss a step, the sale's done. And she was trying to get me to stop jumping 10 feet ahead and so forth. And that's same. I mean, I've just been a person. My entire career has been based on justice and based on bad guys and getting bad guys to pay for their crimes and all that. So I have this drive, that can fall into the realm of a will, whether it be my will or God's will. And it's a hard, and that's what law enforcement faces a lot. It's a hard fall to find out that you can do everything by the book, you can do everything that you're supposed to do, and the bad guys still win.
Yeah.
At times. And then you can
courts aren't necessarily just.
Yeah. And you can confuse that with good and evil and with
I've had lawyer friends that have gone through dark nights of the soul, and they discovered that the justice system isn't always just.
Right.
Yeah, that's a hard one to swallow,
Yeah. Well, and there's where it becomes free will, somebody else's free will. If someone is, however evil it is, maims and kills a child, that's evil. Nobody can, but was that something that God could intervene and this and that? I know people get angry. Why, did this occur? Mm-hmm. It's free will. It's someone.
Well, again, I think there's a misunderstanding because what they're talking about is God's sovereignty. God's sovereign over all things.
Yes.
But that's not what he established here on earth.
Right.
He said
he put human beings on earth and said, now you subdue the earth. You rule it. You plant, you till, you know what I mean? In other words, you're God. You're the gods of this world, for good or bad. And so I think that's one of the hard things is that we have to live with the consequences of our decisions.
Okay, so
and others' decisions.
Decisions. That's right.
I think this is a good segue into, so how do we tap into the other kingdom of God in the spiritual sense and getting back on track with him? And how do we connect to that?
LSD.
What? Well, I think
did you hear me, Bob? Oh my gosh. LSD.
LSD, exactly. Timothy Leary.
Lucy in the sky. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Exactly. What?
That's my plan when I retire.
By the way, LSD's making a comeback.
Oh no.
No, it's true, because the truth of it is it's actually a brilliant drug. And for people that are dealing with schizophrenia and some other things, it's done some amazing things. It's just, again, when it's misused, right? When a good thing.
See, I like this guy.
There's a lot of great albums written on that stuff.
Well, that was not the segue I was thinking of. Anyhow,
okay, sorry, let me get.
Can we get back to the real segue?
That was real. It was a real segue.
Okay.
Well, I just think one of the things, again, where we've got to be careful here is when you're talking about the will of God. I think we need to focus more on morals, values, and ethics, and less on laws.
Well, right. Getting legalism out of it and getting love back into it.
In other words, the will of God is to love one another.
Love one another.
Right? The will of God is there's no greater love than to lay your life down for your brother. There's no, you know what I mean? In other words, when you go back and you look at the teachings of Jesus, the will of God has everything to do with how you treat other people.
Yeah.
It's really not rocket science. And somehow or another, religion and theology and we've created this whole world, and it's like we've lost the simplicity of it all, right? And that's what in fact, it talks about Jesus coming in the fullness of time, and I think actually what had happened is the Jewish religion had become sort of like the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz. It had no heart anymore. It was all about the rules. Right?
The Pharisees and their rules.
Dressed this way, you ate this food, you did right. It was like this whole, legislated behavior. Yeah. And Jesus came back and go, no, I'm going to put my heart back in it. Love one another.
Right.
Treat each other with respect. Have dignity. You know what I mean? It's like all these things, but these are values. These are motives. They're hearts.
And I think to that,
if you get the root right, then a lot of the other decisions, right? The consequences of having those right values, morals, and ethics, you end up seeing fruit.
Well, right. The fruit of the Spirit. I mean, and the fruit of the Spirit, all of those things come along with. And when people talk about the fruit of the Spirit, and if you don't know what the fruit of the Spirit is, look that up. But what were you going to say, Donna?
Well, I was just going to say, and the lack of judgment. And I know that's hard to hear when we talked about earlier about Hitler and Jeffrey Dahmer and all these different mass murderers, serial killers, all these things. Do we judge that? Of course. Do I judge that? Of course I do. Did Jesus die for all of our sins, including them? Yeah. Okay, so there's your.
So what do you do with that?
Jesus lived in the midst of one of the most oppressive political systems in the history of humanity.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, not long after he left the earth, they were using Christians as, torches at dinners and, being thrown in, entertainment in the Colosseum. I mean, it was just a bloodlust.
Right. And Paul in Acts, he was a murderer. So he murdered Christians. So
I mean, thousands of them, thinking he was doing what?
He thought he was doing it for Judaism, right?
The will of God.
The will of God. So, right. And what's that saying? Whatever you think you are.
Yeah.
Whatever you think you are, and that is the truth. So where are you putting your focus? Where are we putting our focus? Are we focusing on our own will, or are we focusing on what God wants for our lives, and how do we figure that out?
I just think to me, it's just like, I just have got this thing in my heart about getting back to Jesus. You know what I mean? Getting back to Jesus' perspective. What, whether it's our country or any other country, it's about getting our hearts right. I mean, everything that's going on in our country right now is fruit. It's not the root.
Yeah.
Right. It's like it's so interesting because you watch the news, right? And all they're dealing with is fruit. Good fruit, bad fruit, this fruit, but nobody actually deals with the root because they don't know how to. It's not their world, right? They don't really know what's at the cause of it. They think it's racism or it's this, right? And you're like, no, racism is also a fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? You see where I'm going with this? It's like
Oh,
the world out there actually has no clue how to actually cure the illness. They don't understand.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
then
I keep saying
then
it's
you have
so
this.
amazing to me because
Yeah.
the teachings of Jesus actually are the medicine to cure the disease.
Yes.
It's like the world is so busy rejecting it and they don't understand that it's actually the cure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's been a disservice to us is the way the narrative is in the American church right now, is that you have to live up to that perfect Christian looking thing. You know, that you have to check all these boxes and this makes you a good Christian. And that's not what Jesus said at all. And he never said that. He never had check
Well,
boxes.
that's actually part of the problem because we live in a world of facades in the church world, right? And what's even worse about it is those outside of the church world see right through it. So I don't know who we're trying to fool. You know what I mean? It's like our mother-in-laws with the six packs, you know? You know what I mean? They see right through it, and you're like, it's just, I just, you know, the older I've got, it's just like this is an embarrassing comedy. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's like we're running around, you know, pretending we're something we're not, and it's like these, you know, go down to the local bar and they'll tell you exactly who we are.
That's right. That's right.
So there's you know, some of what's happening in our world right now, I think, is a reality check. I think God's at work right now, trying to, you know, to bring some, you know, some hard realities. You know,
well, I hope in the last year that God got many people's attention.
Yeah.
I mean, with this, all the things that are going on.
Well, you know, especially in the U.S., we're living in the middle of Disneyland. Like we're in Disney World in America, and we think that's normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like life is fun and entertaining, and look at all. You know what I mean? It's like our whole, you know, our whole existence is about fun.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, there's your reward system. That goes back to the reward system and something that I've now managed to break down, that there is not. And I had a discussion with a very, very close friend of mine the other night about there is no reward. There is no, oh, I'm going to do that. But that's the way we're structured, at least in my world, in the circles that I'm in. We work hard to accomplish something. We set goals.
Well, and those always come into head-on collisions, though, when the good person, you know, the dad of four gets killed in a car wreck.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? The dad, the mother, you know, the homeschool mom who's got it all together dies of cancer. And then all those little neat tiny formulas suddenly come crashing down, and we're sitting there going, "Oh my God, now what do I do?"
Right.
Well, and how many times do we hear, "Oh, of anybody in the world, it shouldn't have happened to that person." You know, why that person? That person didn't do anything to deserve that. Well, no one did. I mean, and I don't mean that. I come across very pessimistic all the time. I get misunderstood all the time, and I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist.
Yeah, I understand.
Blunt. Just a little blunt.
Really? No, tell me more.
Well, no, I appreciate that, though. I actually, you know, I find people like you actually fun to talk to because it's real. You like to, you know, I like people that keep it real, and you know, it's like I had dozens of conversations with religious people when they're with their religious friends, and you hear one thing, and then you get people alone, and then they start asking all these other questions. These, you know, un-PC questions. And that was like a big wake up, like, oh my God. And you begin to realize how many people are living behind a facade, you know? And, you know, I just, you know, I don't have a tolerance for it anymore. I just, you know, I'm sort of like Jesus. I'm a friend to sinners. I just like people that are broken and dysfunctional. And I'm just like, yeah, that's me. Keep it real, as you say.
And I always subscribe to that. I can't tell you how many times I got judged for walking into a bar after I was supposedly such a sold out Christian. And that's what they sold that. and a sold out Christian. That's what they say, a sold out.
No,
and I'm
well,
like,
I was only judging you for your earrings.
Oh,
now, Jesus, basically in Jesus' world, it's a fancy casket with a stinking body.
Yeah. You know what? I made them.
You might have a fancy casket, but you're rotting, stinking in there.
Yeah. Hey, and I just want to say, Debbie, you've been saying some really good stuff, and I'm not trying to not focus on what you've been saying. I like what you're saying, and thank you for joining us. Debbie is one of my friends from Virginia, who's
nice.
just a doll.
Well, we have really kind of blown through our, our 1 hour window, but it's just been a stimulating conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you. You've added another whole dimension to us.
The dimension.
Yeah, it's the LSD. I slipped it in your drink before the show. I dropped
some.
Hold on. What?
Don't worry. I waited till the end for you. It'll hit about 30 minutes.
Yeah, you can tell how it goes for us.
Problem with younger sisters that didn't grow, it's like, some of us grew up in a certain time and age. So we sort of get each other. We kind of read between the lines. We kind of know what each other's talking about. But, you next gen people.
Yep.
She's only a couple of years older than me. I mean, I know I am 25. I know I do, but I really am.
You're kind of like Mike Jones. You're sort of a tweener. You're a tweener Gen X and
she is.
Yeah,
I'm 65. Yeah,
I'm an 80s girl. I'm in the.
Yeah,
from
that's
the
what I mean. I'm a 70s boy, so that's a big difference. Disco queen.
Yeah.
ABBA.
Yeah, Debbie.
PG's Donna Summer.
Debbie is one of the coolest people I know. Thank you, Debbie.
I'm Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Ohio. Bob Dylan. Back when there was real music. Sorry.
Who?
Okay. I just took that little jab there.
I say, Bob, and I'm going to say this and watch your reaction. Spyro Gyra.
Oh, God.
She hates Spyro Gyra. They are an excellent jazz band. Tell this woman she has no idea. Spyro Gyra is awesome.
If you're smoking pot.
Okay.
You like Pink Floyd, right?
Oh, no. I hate Pink Floyd.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah, something happened.
I know.
That was my band in high school.
I like Rush. Which is kind of like Pink Floyd, right?
Good artist. I hate the music.
They're not even close to what? She just rushes like Pink Floyd.
I know a lot about music. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't like Pink Floyd. I just don't. I don't know. It was another brick in the wall. I don't know.
Well, that's because you didn't take LSD.
That would be why. I was not the druggie.
You weren't another brick in the wall.
I was not the druggie of the sisters. I was not enough.
Man, we have really gone off the reservation.
Now she's gonna get me arrested.
So anyway, thank you, Donna, for joining us, and happy birthday. I didn't get to say it to her she's not on Facebook anymore. So Hair. I made Heather listen to Hair one night. The song Hair.
That's a great song.
She said the worst song ever made. I loved that song, actually.
Signs everywhere.
Yep. Okay. Well, all right, you guys. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
We'll see you on Monday.
Coffee chat, and
I'll be looking for
we'll save the coffee chat.
Kansas City.
Yeah, it'll be warm out.
The news and make sure salt and pepper isn't on the front page of the paper.
What? Well, it is going to be 45 over the weekend.
I mean, Donna knows really what salt and pepper means in the law enforcement world.
Right.
Do you see it? Come on, Sandy. Do you know what it means?
No, I don't. actually.
When there's a duo, a black guy and a white guy that committed crime, and it's like call that salt and pepper, or you know.
See, I didn't have that.
Yeah, she was thinking, push it.
Yeah, I hurt my knee dancing to Push It of Salt and Pepper. That's how I know.
She needs help.
I've known that for a bit.
She'll get me straight. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. I'm glad you put up with me still. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good weekend.